Hey YouTube, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be a quick one. I'm going to show you how to regulate and personalize your watch's timekeeping to match up with your own routine. Unlike other watch regulation videos, we're not going to aim for zero today. Sound interesting? Let's jump right in. Some time ago, I unboxed and did an initial thoughts video on the new Cartier Tank Francaise automatic. I provided complete exact measurements and a whole slew of other details in my Cartier Tank Francaise automatic unboxing video. Give it a watch if you haven't already. I'll leave a link in the description below. Over the last few months, I kept tab on its timekeeping using a free app called Watch Check, where you sync the app up with the watch to the minute, and you press measure here as the seconds hand goes exactly 0. And log what position and ambient temperature the last interval was for. Then it gives you a record of all the intervals you ever logged. You can even create new logs in case the watch stops along the way and renders your last log obsolete, which happened to me. Moving back to the more comprehensive log here, you can see that the app gives a timekeeping rate for each interval. It's easy to see that the more records you have in this log, the messier it gets. It does provide an average rate for each log on the bottom, and ours says 9.2 seconds fast per day, which is pretty unacceptable. I've mentioned in previous videos that I usually prefer my watches to run a little fast than slow. By little, I mean no more than 3 seconds a day. We're going to target this range in this video, but a simple 9.2 second average gain readout is not enough information for what we want to do. Going back to the app here, click this list icon on the upper right corner, and the mess that was the interval listing gets magically summarized into a list of rate variances per position. The watch runs fastest in the dial-up position, gaining almost 11 seconds a day on average. It has spent a lot of time in this position since I swapped the metal bracelet out for leather straps. If you want to see how that went, I'll have a card or link in the screen right about now. It's less fast in the 3-up or crown-up position, which was the overnight resting position when it still had the bracelet installed. You also notice that the Tank Francaise actually runs slow in the 9-up or crown-down position. This isn't as important to me. I only took an interval in this position out of curiosity and avoid resting the watch like so, as not to scratch the spinel cabochon on the crown. The last two readings are pretty important. The watch averages 9 seconds fast when worn and a little over 10 on the winder. Now that we have proper information to work with, we can go ahead and regulate the watch. Before opening the watch case, I'd like to point out that you can always send your timepiece to the service center if it's still under warranty or if you don't have much confidence in your fine motor skills. I've regulated all 4 of my Santuses, and the fine adjustment screw and the caliber 1853 ought to make things easier for me today, so here it goes. Because the metal bracelet was swapped out for leather straps, I have easy access to the case back. If your watch still has a metal bracelet on it, you'd want to disconnect one of the links to gain access. I'm dealing with case back screws on this tank today, so all I need is a simple micro screwdriver. If you're dealing with screw-in or pressed case backs, specialized tools like these will be necessary, so keep that in mind. Before attempting to open it up, wipe the case back down, then use some Rodico to clean the areas surrounding the watch case. At $11, a bar of this is pretty pricey. I've always suspected that this isn't any different from the cheap putty for kids to stick their artwork to walls. We're doing this to prevent dust or dirt entry once you remove the case back. While we're on the topic of dust and dirt, you'd also want to make sure you're in a clean room with very still air. Now that we have things tidy, it's time to remove the screws and open the case back. When you're working with micro screwdrivers, make sure that you're using the largest size possible and that the blade is seated and centered well on the screw before you start turning. This way, you don't leave marks on the screw heads. Once you have all screws loose, remove them one by one using tweezers, brass ones preferably, and place them on a secure surface. After you do that, stick some Rodico onto the case back and use it to carefully lift the whole thing out of the way. Make sure you rest the case back on a clean surface. With the case back off, let's put the watch on the time grapher and verify the figures we lifted from the Watch Check app. Pardon the wonky sound here, by the way. My noise-canceling mic didn't seem too happy with the ticking. We weren't able to get face-down measurements in the app, but the time grapher shows that the watch runs about 13 seconds fast per day. Putting the watch in a dial-up position, we see that the rate change slows to 9 seconds a day. Switching over to the 3-up or crown-up position and letting it settle for a bit, we can see that the rate actually drops to about 0. Now, recall that the app's calculation for this position was about 3 fast a day. The record for the dial-up position, on the other hand, was 11 seconds fast a day, which is again a little faster than what the time grapher showed earlier. The app also calculated the rates for our other important positions, worn and on winder, to be 9 and 10 seconds fast respectively. For today's project, we'll work with the time grapher's figures to make it easier to see and film real-time results. Since the time grapher consistently reads slower than the WatchCheck app's records, we run the risk of setting the watch faster than we want to by doing so. But we'll let that slide today. Recall that all our positions yielded an average rate of 9 seconds fast a day when weighted by time spent. I want the rate to sit somewhere between 1 and 3 seconds fast, so I'll target 2 for today. 9 minus 2 yields a delta of 7 seconds. With this in mind, we'll drop the dial-up rate from 9 seconds fast to 2 seconds fast and observe the watch from there. So how do we do this? Hold your mechanical or automatic watch close to your ear and you'll hear rapidly alternating ticks and tocks. That's because its balance wheel is held on by a hairspring that allows it to rotate back and forth by this center line, releasing energy from the mainspring and rotating the gears forward a tiny bit at a time. Most watches have the regulator set up with 3 adjusters. I have this rough sketch to help show you guys today. Adjuster A clocks the entire balance and hairspring assembly to the center line, essentially setting how long or short the ticks are relative to the tocks. This shows up as a beat error on our time grapher's display. 0.1 or 0.2 milliseconds is acceptable and doesn't alter the power reserve too much. I only start adjusting this once I see 0.4 or higher. But if I do, it's the first thing I touch before anything else. Course regulator B here alters the free length of the hairspring and determines how fast or slow the movement runs. It's very sensitive, and nudging it 1/4 of a millimeter is usually enough to swing the rate by 20 seconds. Here's something that isn't always present on watches: fine regulator C. In the case of the Tank Francaise we have here today, fine adjustment is facilitated by an off-center cam screw that nudges course regulator B in tiny increments. Right, let's see how all of this looks like in person. If you're enjoying this video so far, please do click the like and subscribe buttons down there. I'm trying to grow my subscriber count and would really appreciate all the help I can get. So on Cartier's caliber 1853, this is adjuster A, this is course regulator B, and this is fine regulator C. We're going to nudge course regulator B until the dial-up rate lands close to 2 seconds fast. If we're lucky and land on it perfectly, we won't even have to touch fine regulator C. All that said, let's get on with it. Before we get to nudging and adjusting, clean the tip of your screwdriver or tweezer to make sure you don't leave dust on the movement. Since we're aiming to set the dial-up rate to 2 seconds fast and the dial-down rate consistently reads around 4 seconds higher than the dial-up rate, we'll target 6 second fast for the former. We do that by nudging course regulator B closer to adjuster A. This increases the length of the hairspring and the time it takes for the balance wheel to oscillate back and forth. A little goes a long way here. I moved it barely a few hairs towards me and the rate swung from 12 seconds fast to 2 seconds slow. After I nudged it ever so slightly away from me, you can see the slope of the timekeeping graph reacting instantly before settling at 3 seconds fast a day. Let's see how the dial-up rate looks like. Unfortunately, getting the dial-down rate to 3 fast isn't enough. The dial-up rate is drastically slower now. You'll also notice that the relationship or rate spread between the two positions has increased to 7 seconds now. That's just the way it is. We'll continue prioritizing the dial-up positions rate. Jumping forward a bit here, I nudged the course regulator away from me and overshot once again before finally bringing this position's rate down to 8 seconds fast a day. This is close enough to our target of 6, and any further adjustments can be done using fine regulator C. But let's see how the dial-up rate looks like first. Well, it looks like we got lucky and won't need to do any more tweaks. Let's see how the 3-up rate looks like. 2 seconds slow, that's pretty okay. What about the 9-up position? Okay, that's more fast than slow. Definitely a big change considering it was the slowest of all positions before we regulated this watch today. And there you go, it settled at 4 seconds fast a day. Similar to what we encountered with the dial up and dial down positions, this is yet another case of the relationship among positions changing as we regulate the watch. I won't adjust for this anymore, since the watch doesn't really stay in the crown down position a lot, and also since we've already reached our 2-second dial up target. With everything done, it's time to reinstall the case back. If you have a dust blower like this, it's a good idea to clear the movement and case of any dust. Once everything looks nice and clean, it's time to seal the watch up. Lower the case back onto the watch and seat the case back screws one by one. Start the screws in a cross pattern. Like I said earlier, you'd want to make sure your screwdriver is properly seated and centered before turning to avoid marring the screws. Firing the screws in a cross pattern evenly distributes force in the gasket under the case back. If you skip this and tighten one screw at a time instead before starting the other ones, you run the risk of a seal imbalance and compromised water resistance. With everything in order, it's time to tighten the screws one by one. The logical progression of what I said earlier applies. Once you're done turning each screw, release the force from your fingers first before lifting the micro screwdriver up. Check out all these clean screws. And the watch is back in service. I'll wear this for a few days and share what my new watch check record looks like in a bit. It's been around a week and a half since I regulated this watch, and I tried to take as much position interval readings as I can. The average rate settled at 3.1 seconds fast per day, which is 0.1 seconds faster than our target range of 1 to 3 seconds. I'll take that over the 9-second daily gain we had when we first started this project. Going into position-specific rates here, you can see that the Tank Francaise now gains just 1.7 seconds daily when worn on the wrist. The average rate gain for the dial-up position is 4.8 seconds per day, a little higher than the time grapher's readout for this position, just as we predicted. The 3-up or crown-up rate sits at 2.6 seconds fast per day. Recall that the time grapher actually read 2 seconds slow for this position, which would have translated to about flat or a second fast in real life, based on the time grapher versus real-life discrepancies we observed. Power reserve fluctuations might be the reason for the spread we see here. Still, a 2.6 second rate is within our target range of 1 to 3. Together, all of these positions would have easily met the target range. Things were just skewed by having the watch on the winder for 2 full days and running at a whopping 5 seconds fast per day. That said, I'm confident that the average daily rate will drop further below 3.1 seconds fast a day the longer I keep the watch off the winder. So there you have it, a quick guide on how to use a time grapher and technology to tailor your watch's timekeeping for your own daily routine and not just aim for 0. As you saw earlier, all of our results were achieved by setting the dial down positions rate 6 fast per day. If we targeted 0 in this position as intuition would have dictated and pulled all 6 seconds off of it, our average rate would have dropped well into the negatives and far out of our target range. One last thing I'd like to point out is that everything I showed you guys here today only applies to index regulators. Index regulators come in many shapes and sizes. Sometimes you don't get a fine regulator, and all you have to work with is a coarse regulator. This was the case with the Santos de Cartier's 1847 MC movement. Sometimes you get a wonderful swan neck regulator that prevents the fine adjustment from being knocked out of position. You can see it on my vintage Omega Seamasters 565 movement here and, in more beautiful form, on this photo of an Alang Unsons from Hodinkee. I'm not saying you should go about adjusting your Alang Unsons regulator yourself, but you can do so by turning this side-facing screw right here, which allows you to move the fine regulator with extreme precision. Watches with free sprung balances, such as Rolex's and Jaeger LeCoultre's, cannot be regulated using the methods shown in this video. These pieces require a special tool to adjust the tiny screws or nuts around the balance wheel and alter its inertia to effect timekeeping changes. I hope you found this video useful and informative. If you want to see more of these, I'd really appreciate you hitting the like and subscribe buttons down there. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.